At that point, as she turns around the door swings and standing behind the door looking at her, what I can only describe as pure hatred in her eyes, is the patient, naked, with her long hair down to her waist. People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? I worked as a harbor master a while ago. I had to check the marina's cameras after a boat was abandoned at our docks. I was looking for the owner. I looked on the tape from the boat's first night in the marina. The man who had sailed the boat in was standing on the end of his boat for 2 hours, barely moving. Then at 1:30 a.m. he just walked off the back and dropped into the water. He never came back up. Never found his body. Freaky. I used to do IT support for a charity that supplied housing and support for homeless people. A large proportion also had mental health issues, so there were a fair amount of interesting events that happened. Being in IT, I avoided experiencing most of it firsthand, though I was threatened with being stabbed on about my 3rd day. Anyway, I come in one Monday, and there's an email labeled urgent, saying there was an incident at the stairwell of one of the properties on Sunday night, and could I pull the relevant CCTV footage and put it on a DVD. I had to do this fairly frequently. I skip through the footage, find the incident, usually a fight or blatant drug dealing, and burn it to DVD for the police. The email never mentioned what the incident was, so I skip through the footage and watch as a very agitated man ties a rope around a stair rail at the top of the stairs, then his neck, looks over the rail and then just casually tips forward over it. The rope flipped him around, and he dangled there twitching for far too long before he just stopped. I wasn't a security officer, but I worked at a 24/7 gas station for a while. One night my coworker accidentally killed himself while at work, and I made the mistake of watching the footage. He went to the back of the store with a bag of drugs, probably cocaine, snorted it and started acting funny for about 10 minutes. He then sits in the back office and gets fidgety/thrashing around until finally he just goes limp in the chair. He had died of a heart attack and sat there for 5 hours before anybody came in, thought the absence of an employee was strange and called the cops. It was really weird seeing people come in and act all pissy for the lack of service. They'd just leave thinking someone was lazy. But nah. Dude was dead. I work in a retail store, and for a while, I worked security here. Watching the security cameras wasn't technically my job, but we were consistently short-handed in that department and then the manager was grooming me for promotion, so I got to fill in and watch the cameras occasionally. One day when we were reviewing footage from overnights, we saw this teenager calmly set down his shopping basket, take off his hat and glasses, and just charge at a wall. Hit it head on. He did this 2 more times. When he was done, his face was a bloody mess, and he put his hat and glasses back on and just left. Weirded me right the hell out. Was a security coordinator for a large electric company and had access to like 80+ facilities CCTV infrastructures. Was doing a maintenance check on some random train station at like 3 a.m., panned a camera as far to the right as possible to check that it was functioning, and this dude was on all fours eating a deer in the middle of the tracks. Watched him for like 10 minutes and went to get the other guy on shift. When I came back, the dude was gone. Rewound it, and the dude stopped munching on the carcass, wiped the gore off his face, and walked into the woods like he didn't have a care in the world. I used to do IT support for a company that had a lot of heavy machinery moving around inside a big warehouse type area. This giant front-end loader would scoop up material and dump it into a hopper. Along the sides of the floor were these huge concrete barriers. I've heard them called Jersey barriers and mafia blocks, but they are about 10 feet tall, and this one guy's life was ended when the front-end loader inadvertently scooped the base of the barrier and landed on one of 2 guys walking shoulder to shoulder through the plant. I was tasked to review the footage, then make copies, 6 of them, to be exact, and then ensure that the footage worked and was self-executable and able to be run from a USB stick. So I had to watch the footage of this guy get killed over a dozen times. I, too, was offered counseling for just watching the video. Not a job, but my so and I have the owlet monitor for our infant looking at his crib and room. It's set up like CCTV and it's creepy, to begin with. I wake up at 2 a.m. and I go check on him and I go back to bed. Once in bed, I get on my phone to view the monitor just for reassurance and I see 2 light dots like eyes in night vision in the window of his room. I first shit my pants and I go in the room to check everything out. I can't see anything outside, so I turn on the monitor again and don't see the dots anymore, so I think it could be a dog or something. I go back to bed and wake up again an hour later to check the monitor and the dots are fucking there again, so I grab a pistol and go outside around his room and check the spot by the window, ready to have to pull the trigger. Adrenaline is on full blast. I don't find or see anything, but the monkey grass has been mashed down by that window as something sat there for a while. I set up a sleeping bag in my son's room after that for a couple of nights, and I checked the monitor so I could see what the night vision caught, but I never saw those lights again. I reviewed the security cameras around my office building. The cameras only monitor the outside of the building. We have signs posted everywhere stating cameras are watching. You get accustomed to certain movement patterns and activation of cameras, so I don't have to review the whole day's activity, just the parts that show things out of the ordinary. For a while, homeless people were using our behind landscaping to kick back and smoke drugs. Marijuana, heroin off foil, glass meth pipes, you name it. It's all in full view of one of the cameras. I watched a few drug sales there too. However, the most disturbing by far was the sex. Guys would take the homeless women to that area and do any number of weird and wonderful things. The weirdest of all was when some dude lay on the ground and a drug-slinging / homeless woman sat on a bench looking at her phone. He slipped off her flip-flop and started sucking off her toes. He took short breaks intermittently to hit a glass meth pipe, then went back to work on the toes. This went on for about 45 minutes, then they left. We systematically found almost all the homeless porn stars during the day and told them our place has cameras and not to come back. Things have been quiet for a few years now. Years ago I worked overnight at a homeless shelter for men. A good portion of the regular guys that stayed there had mental health and/or drug problems. There were a lot of fights and the occasional stabbing, but for the most part, everyone was relatively behaved and most were good people at heart. I received a lot of threats, but one ever acted on them. One night when I arrived for my shift, I noticed there was a much larger police presence than usual. I walked into our office and the officer in charge started asking me if I had noticed a guy, Richard, behaving unusually at all lately. I had not seen anything out of the ordinary and I told them such. I looked at the dorm list and noted that he was marked as no longer staying at the shelter. He was a long-term resident, so I thought this was odd. The police left without telling me anything except the fact they needed security footage from 2 specific cameras from the night before. I did not work the night before and the guy I normally work with pulled a no-show. We were the only 2 people besides the manager, who was on a holiday, that were trained on how to burn footage to a DVD. I spent the rest of my shift in shock. When I found the footage they were looking for, I felt physically ill. Richard had gone out onto the second floor smoking deck, finished a cigarette, got up on the railing, and dove headfirst into the cement below. The first camera on the second floor showed him jump, but the second camera on the first floor was much more gruesome. He landed headfirst and rolled over in a way that he was staring right into the camera as he lay there dying. I quickly put the footage on DVD and went to throw up. I was given the next day off. No counseling. No nothing. I will never forget that one. He was a pretty good dude as far as I knew him. Some mental issues, but no one knew he was suicidal or why he did it. I used to be a security guard and was stationed at an outdoor engine parts manufacturer's world headquarters office. They had a parking lot that was next to the woods, and a man came out of the tree line during the night and was staring at the camera for an hour straight. We had called the authorities to make a trespassing complaint as none of us wanted to go out and confront him. Around the hour mark, he suddenly sprinted backwards into the woods. The police never found anyone. Shit creeps me out whenever I think about it. Worked on campus watching cameras, was doing my hourly check at around 1 a.m. while talking to my buddy who was the on-duty guard. While flipping through the cameras, I passed by one of our entrances and saw some guy standing at the door just starting in. I spotted it and flipped back to the said camera, and my buddy and I just stopped talking and looked at each other cause he was gone. I switched to the next camera, which was the exterior camera, and he was not anywhere to be seen. I asked my buddy if he wanted to go check it out. He said hell no. We checked the footage to see if we saw it right, and sure enough, he was there, but we could never find him on any other camera at that time. The university I worked at was reportedly haunted, but I don't exactly believe in ghosts. I still don't believe it was one, but it was still creepy as all hell and I can't explain what exactly happened. I have other stories from doing patrols with guards at night, but that's my freakiest night on camera. The closest to a horror movie IRL thing I've ever seen. Some of the patient rooms in our hospital on the psych floor have cameras to help monitor patients so they don't move around too much or hurt themselves since they are often confused, etc. Obviously, the night vision low light camera makes everything look creepy. One night a phlebotomist came running out of a room freaking out. We looked at the camera footage to see what had happened. The patient was an old lady. Video shows a dark empty room. The phlebotomist walks in and sees that the bed is empty and thinks they must have moved the patient. At that point, as she turns around the door swings and standing behind the door looking at her what I can only describe as pure hatred in her eyes is the patient, naked, with her long hair down to her waist. The phlebotomist was scared as anyone would be. She finally managed to say, "Mrs. Shelby, I'm from the lab and I'm here to draw some blood, is that okay?" And the patient just said no. "Get out." Phlebotomist didn't need to be told twice. We walked over to the room and the old lady was back in bed sleeping as peaceful as could be, never remembered a moment of it. I'm a little late to the party, but here goes. I am a correctional officer on the night shift, so my job involves a lot of watching cameras and performing cell checks. One night, I'm sitting in my office around 03:00 and some movement on the CCTV catches my eye. I look up and there is this big dude walking through my jail, looking like he was on a mission. The only way into the jail is through the booking room right next to my office, and I was 100% sure nobody had walked past me. So my mind starts racing. Did I leave a cell door unlocked? Has a violent inmate escaped? Our cameras are old and the halls are dark at night, so I couldn't see many details on the guy. Just that he seemed to be scoping all the other inmates out as he made his way through the cell blocks. As I'm trying to process all of this, I see him suddenly stop and change direction, starting beeline straight to my office. With no time to do anything else, I jump up and run over to the door, and get ready for the fight. I waited for what felt like an eternity for this guy to bust my door in, with a full-on adrenaline rush. But he never showed up. I glanced back at the cameras and he was gone, disappeared into the ether. After scratching my head for a minute, I went to review the footage. That's when I realized that there was a glitch in our camera's playback that had caused a half-hour delay, and the guy in the video was just me doing a cell check and heading back to my own office. Never been more relieved in my life. Worked security in one of the larger financial buildings in downtown Toronto several years back as a control room operator. The complex has hundreds of cameras monitoring the inside and outside of this building, and I spent most of my 12-hour day and night shifts just people watching. It is honestly pretty amazing what people do when they don't think they are being watched. A lot of parking lot sex on weekends, for example. During a night shift, I have witnessed someone walk through the PATH system, underground tunnel system connecting many Toronto buildings, covered in blood with an eye popped out, someone eating their toenails, some following others while discreetly touching themselves, etc. One of the weirder creepy ones though was a man walking through the building in the dead of night, before lockups, slowly, carrying a single balloon. That one got to me. When I worked as a security officer, it was my first week on the job. I watched my boss and another officer try to talk a guy ready to jump off of the top of our parking structure, which didn't work. I watched him jump off and land next to an employee who was coming in for her shift. Guy hit the ground so hard it exploded the belt right off of his pants. I will never forget watching that. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.